Welcome, collectors of all ages. This is Mike with Jayhawker Vintage Cards. In today's video, I'm going to talk about hobby topics, and that's something I don't normally do. I've only been on YouTube for a little over 3 months now, but I've been collecting cards for over 40 years. So I don't normally talk in these first few months that I've been doing this about hobby topics. I've been showing SGC reveals and showing you some cards and special autographs and things like that that have personal stories behind them, which is my favorite thing to do. But I do have opinions, and I do have strong opinions on things, and other things I don't have a strong opinion on. But I'm going to talk about some things I do have opinions on today. Kind of my turn to do that. There's a lot of videos out there, a lot of people who mainly talk about topics. And I love these. I love the communication. I love the conversations that go back and forth. But I'm going to bring up about 5 or 6 topics that I really want to talk about. And I'm not going to go too in depth because I don't want this to be an hour-long video. So I'll try to keep it concise. And if you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me if you want more elaborate explanations on my views. But the first thing I want to talk about is one, and the reason I'm actually doing this video more than anything is because it's affected me twice. But I'm only going to talk about one, and that is eBay authentication. Now, I understand the concept of that. I'm not going to bore you with those details. You can go to eBay and look it up. You can go to Google it and see what eBay authentication is all about. And I actually think it's a good thing, with caveat, and I'll get to that. So, I know from doing the research that I've done on it, people buy sneakers, and I guess there's a huge, knockoff sneaker market, or purses, or jewelry. You can buy whatever you want on eBay. There's all kinds of things. But at a certain price point, eBay will send it to an authenticator to ensure that that product, that item, is legit, that it's real, that it's authentic. Well, they do that to sports cards too, or Pokemon or whatever. But everything I'm going to really talk about here has to do with vintage cards, because that's the community that we're in. So I could buy a card for, let's say, I'll just throw out an example, a 1951 Wheaties Stand Usual, okay? And let's say it's a certain price point. But let's say it's graded by PSA or SGC. Well, it gets shipped from the buyer to the eBay authenticator. And when it comes to sports cards, if I understand it, it gets sent to PSA. That's who the eBay authenticator is. So I just think it's kind of funny. So I could go online and buy a PSA card, or a card graded already by PSA. So they've already authenticated it, right? And then it gets sent to PSA to authenticate. What? Why? That makes no sense to me. Or SGC. Now we know PSA and SGC are separate companies. They're owned by the same they're owned by the same company, and now there's a lot of mingling, and we'll get into that later, maybe. But I recently bought an item, and this is why I'm bringing this up. I bought that 1951 Stand Usual Wheaties. Beautiful card. In fact, I'm going to put a picture of it right here, and I'm going to make it big so you can see it. So there's the front of it, and you can look for it. It's a beautiful card, beautiful item. I'm not a big fan of the huge SGC slab that it's in, but it is what it is. And then here's a picture of the back. Beautiful, beautiful item. Well, it got sent to eBay authentication. Now, I bought this card at the very beginning of June. And, you watch the tracking, and it says, okay, it's been shipped to the eBay authenticator, and there it just sat in that status for weeks and weeks. And then finally I contacted eBay via email and said, where the hell is my item? Well, I didn't get a response, but then suddenly the next day it says it has been received by eBay authenticator. And then it sat, and it waited, and it sat, no update. And finally I got notice or notification that authenticator could not authenticate the item. Why? Because of the description, the way the seller had described the item when they listed it. Now, that's the second time this has happened to me. The first time it was a raw item. It was that, if you've seen that Butterfinger Jimmy Fox that I have, it did it to that one too. Now, obviously, SGC had graded the item and authenticated it and gave it a grade, which you saw. And so instead of the seller being able to send me the card that I purchased, it gets bounced around. And you know just as good as I am, the more something is bounced around in the mail, what could happen? It could get damaged. Now, if your item is authenticated by eBay or PSA, it comes in a very secure package that looks like this. So you can see it comes in a really sturdy cardboard box. It has this really tight blue heavy cardstock, or cardboard stock, I should say, that it comes in. So that's a great thing. And I've had several items come that way. I'm very pleased with that. If it's not authenticated, it gets sent to you like crap. So here is the envelope. When it finally came, which was recently, it came in just a plain envelope. And when I saw this thing, I knew that there could be issues on the inside. And there was. So it just came in that plain envelope, nothing, no protection. And then it came wrapped, and here's what it came wrapped in. This. One little two sheets of this. Okay, of this bubble wrap around this item. And if you can see, at the front, right there, it was damaged. And I knew by looking at that envelope when I got this card, or this item, that it was going to be damaged. Then I flipped it over. Look at that. I almost said something I shouldn't have. Really? Really? So you saw the item. The seller did not have the item this way. It got damaged by eBay and their authenticated process, whatever. That's not acceptable to me. Now, I haven't looked really close to see if it damaged there, because I will lose my everlasting mind. Now, obviously, I am not a quiet person, so I picked up the phone and I called and said, just shoot me up the ladder. I don't want to talk to the lower level person. Just shoot me up. Well, I will say, I'll give eBay credit. They refunded me the price it's going to take for me to ship and insure and regrade that item with SGC. That's fine. I'm happy for that. But they don't give you money for the frustration. And I'm not looking for the frustration. And it's just the inconvenience. I want the item. I paid a lot of money for it. I shouldn't have to do this. So I'm not trying to, this isn't about getting any more money or refund them. It's just the fact that this should be optional. If you have an item that's already graded, it should be an optional feature that I can say, hey, I trust that it was graded by SGC or PSA or whoever. Just ship it to me. I'll take that risk, okay? Because I don't want this to happen again to me, and I certainly don't want it to happen to any of you too. And some of you might have experienced that. But anyway, well, let's just look at the mutual itself. Is beautiful. I love that. Stan the Man's one of my favorite players of all time. So, and it's an oversized item, and it was relatively good price. But the fact that it gets sent off to eBay Authentication, and I had no choice. I had no ability to say, no, just send it to me. It's authenticated already, SGC authenticated. Now, I don't want to hear from some of you saying, well, there's been cases where this card was authenticated by slab by PSA or SGC, and it turned out to not be. I understand that. We all understand that. What's the percentage of that happening? I mean, I don't know. Greg from Midlife Cards can research that because he's great at that stuff, but it's so small that I'm going to take that risk because, I'm not looking to flip this thing. This isn't my collection until they bury me, okay? Or until I just decide at a hopefully later age that I don't want to collect anymore, or something comes up where I need to sell some things. Sure, then I'll sell it. But eBay, give us that option to say, no, make it an optional thing. If at the very least, if something's already been graded by, I don't care what, if it's a coin or a card, or if it's already been authenticated by a reputable grading company, give us the option to say, send us the dang item. We don't need to have it bouncing around from point A to point B to point C to point D and have that kind of crap happen. It's just, it's not right. I understand the place for the authentication process. And like I said, I think it's a good thing. And most things that are sold on eBay are not graded. But when they are, give us that chance to say, no, send us the item. It could be a seller that you've dealt with many times before that you trust. Send us the item. Give us that opportunity to check a box and say, nope, we don't want that. Make it optional, at the very least for items that are reputable or have already been graded by a reputable grading company. That's my opinion. I would like to know what you guys think about that. I would like to know if any of you have experienced that before, because it just annoys the heck out of me. Now, the other thing, another issue I want to talk about is grading. I'm going to talk very short because there's so much in grading, it would take me 2 hours to go through it. So I'm going to talk specifically about grading versus ungraded. And really, I'm going to talk about a video I watched a little while back, and it was Greg with Midlife Cards, and he had 2 guests on the show. And I'll apologize, I don't remember who one of them was, but the other one was Dylan, Double D. Now, I don't want you, when I say this, to think that I'm thinking bad of Dylan or I'm thinking bad of Greg, because those 2 guys are 2 of my favorite people to watch videos of. I've never met any of them in person, and I've really never talked to any of them other than a message or a comment on YouTube. But they had a great video, and you should really look it up, because it's a perfect example for people who come from 2 completely different views on grading. Greg is very analytical. He does a lot of research. He looks at trends and strategies and tries to see what the value of that might be, and looks at, here's what the cards, if you see a card that has a grade of a 4, and he'll do a lot of research, and I'm assuming that he buys cards that way. I don't want to speak for anybody because I don't like people speaking for me, but from listening to him over the years, he doesn't normally just go out and randomly see a card that he likes and buys. He wants to do a little bit of research, and maybe he already has that research done before he even goes out, so it's already up there in his head, so he can look at something and say, okay, that's a 4, but it's a little bit off center. There's a 3 that's really centered that I think is better than that 4. And I agree with him. There's a lot of cards that are out there like that. Where Dylan, I guess the way to look at it is guys like Greg maybe buy cards or collect a little bit more with their head, and then Dylan collects a little bit more with his heart. That's way too much of a overgeneralization, and where I fall on that is, man, I'm all over the place. I can be that way, but there's a lot of Dylan in me too, where if I see a card that I think is beautiful, that is a card that I want to have in my collection, then I'm likely to buy that. Now, Dylan doesn't really care about the value when he buys it. Now, I do, because I am on a very low monthly budget. In fact, I don't even really call it a monthly budget. It's so low, I just kind of know what I can spend. So I kind of, in the combination of the 2, I will kind of look up, like if I see an item that I want, obviously I'll look it up and see what that item in similar grades sell for, but I'm looking more at the eye appeal. So I don't necessarily look at every SGC 4 or every SGC 5 that's been recently selling. I'll look at ones that I think look similar to that card, because we all know grading is subjective, and maybe on that day that card got graded a 3, but the next day it might have got graded a 5, because you never know. I'm not going to base what I buy a card on the number of some 22-year-old bro who's grading it after a night out with his fellow bros, and he has a hangover and he's just having a crappy day. So I don't look at that, and I definitely don't care about values. So Greg talks a lot about, and it was funny in that video, they're kind of Greg was having a hard time understanding, I think, how Dylan was collecting, or having a hard time believing that Dylan doesn't give a crap about the value down the line, because people collect differently. You know, I know people that have absolutely no plan to sell any cards, and they don't sell any cards right now, and they don't plan on selling any cards. Those people, they don't care what the value is going to be 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. They just want that card in their collection because it makes them happy. And I'm very much that way. But I'm a lot like Greg in that I like to have a little bit of knowledge, because I don't want to overpay because I can't afford to, because my budget is so small compared to a lot of the guys out there that have the YouTube content that they create. So I'm kind of a little bit all over the place, and my guess is a lot of you guys are too. But I got a kick out of that video because Dylan would explain how he buys cards and how he collects, and then Greg would come back with, but aren't you concerned like maybe what the value is that you might overpay? And Dylan's like, no, I don't care. I'm not selling the card. It's in my collection. So it's just really interesting to see that. So my point of bringing this up is, let's not overthink it. I think sometimes we're like a dog chasing its tail. We're talking about the same topics over and over again. And the reason we do that, obviously, is because it's fun. So I guess I'm kind of speaking to those of you who are newer, who are still kind of finding your way in this hobby and trying to figure out a strategy for you and how you want to collect. Just don't overthink. Don't get locked in such a one way of doing it that you lose out on cards because you're so worried that maybe it's not quite the right one. Maybe it's a 20 bucks higher than you thought it would be. Because let me tell you, in 5 or 10 years, it's probably going to be that price you paid. I mean, I have price guides going back to 1980. And I can tell you, although people may say, oh, vintage cards are going to die out. They've been saying that since I was a kid, because I started collecting vintage cards. And I had so many of my friends tell me, you're collecting guys that are dead that nobody's even heard of. Well, there's a lot more of those guys that are dead that we haven't heard of as we've gotten older. But you know what? What's the big thing now? So many of us collect the golden era. Guys we never saw play. A lot of us collect pre-war. Guys that our dads didn't see play. Or maybe even our granddads didn't see play. Vintage is not going away. Ever. It's not. And I don't care if the trend is Pokemon and Pokemon and TCG and all that. I understand that. But they've been saying the same thing for decades. The vintage is going out. I'm telling you, it's not. Another thing that kind of bothers me is terms. People get caught up in terms, phrases. It really bothers people, some people, that we call cards junk wax, or that we call items oddball, or that we talk about eye appeal, or that we talk about collector grade. Why does it matter? Why does it bother you if that bothers you? In the whole scheme of things, in this collecting hobby of ours, why does it matter? Why do we have to get so worked up over it? If you want to call something or refer to cards from 1989 as a junk wax card, do it. Because you know what? We're all going to know what you mean. If you don't want to call it that and you want to call it something else, fine. I don't care. I'm still going to think it's junk wax. But if you call it something different, you know what? I'm going to know what you're talking about. If you're going to look at something as an oddball item, but the next guy goes, why are you calling it an oddball item? I don't like that term. Who cares? It doesn't matter, right? You know, there's some items that are oddball. Slurpee coins, to me, are oddball items. Some of the food sets that are weird shaped, some of those are oddball items. It doesn't really matter. So if you're a newer collector out there, don't be afraid to call anything whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. There's a lot more important things to be concerned about than what terms we use to describe certain cards. Now, if it's something that's completely wrong, that's one thing. You know, that's a whole different type of topic. But, you know, if you're going to call something junk wax, more likely it's going to be, for 99% of it, we're going to consider that card a junk wax card. Another thing I want to talk about, and this one's really been bothering me, and that's card shows. Now, card shows, if you attend them, you've noticed in the past year, especially, but maybe 2 years, but really the past year, it's been the invasion of Pokemon. It's everywhere. It's overtaking shows. Cards that, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm going to guess this is probably true for no matter where you live at. There's a lot of show promoters who have put on a show pretty regularly, a lot of times at the same location, the same month of the year. They kind of have like a spring. Some of them do it like every other month. Point is, for years, it was a sports card show. You'd walk in and basically every table is sports card, whether it's vintage, modern, ultra modern. And yeah, there'd be, you know, a case that might have had some Pokemon stuff and non-sports cards in there. But boy, this past year, Pokemon is taken over. And you know, I know there's a difference between Pokemon and TCG. Pokemon's just what I'm going to say, because that's what I'm used to saying. My problem is this. When you go to a show that's promoted as a sports card show, and let me say that again, promoted, advertised as a sports card show, I expect it to be a sports card show. That doesn't mean I don't expect to see a Pokemon anywhere in sight, but what I don't expect to see is 40% of the tables Pokemon, or 50%, or 60%. Now, if the promoter wants to advertise the show as a card show or a collectible show, and they have the little, you know, they have baseball cards and football cards and the Pokemon characters or TCG or Hot Wheels or whatever, Star Wars, that's fine, because I see how it's being promoted, and then I can make the choice. Do I want to drive the hour or so to get to that show to see what they have? My problem is when it's a show that is promoted as a sports card show, and you get there and you're seeing a bunch of Pokemon stuff. And sometimes they mix it so much that they promote something as a sports card show, but then you look at the advertisement and sure enough, you see a little Pokemon emblem on there, right? Logo. And best example of that I have is there's the card show in Kansas City in May that I was going to set up at, but things happened and I didn't. But I did end up going to that show on a Saturday afternoon. This was in Kansas City. It was promoted as the KC Royalty Show. They were promoting, or they were doing a show to celebrate the 1985 and 2015 World Series champions Royals teams. They had a bunch of guys lined up for autographs. A number of those actually ended up backing out. Some of them the day before they were supposed to sign. It was a 3-day show, or maybe even the day of. And so I went to it on a Saturday afternoon, the second day of the show. And I walked in, and this was supposed to be like a 400, 450 table show. It's supposed to be the biggest one in Kansas City, and it may have been. But it was 40 to 50% Pokemon. You know, I talked to a number of dealers that were there. In fact, I talked to some guys when I went late in the day on Saturday, late in the afternoon. There were already dealers, when I went to the parking garage back to my car, there were already dealers hauling their stuff out. And they were pissed because they were like, everybody there had Pokemon. And where they were at, they were so far back in an area, nobody was even going to them. And they heard through the grapevine that some guys were, or I should say guys, because there were girls there too, but some collectors were walking around and they were so disappointed by just seeing Pokemon table and Pokemon table and Pokemon table. They didn't even go around the whole show. It was kind of a weird, there's like two different areas. There's like a big area over here, like where the autograph stand was. And then there's kind of an L shape that kind of went to the back. And there was very little vintage there. Very little vintage there. There's a lot of ultra modern and modern, but it was just the amount of Pokemon that was there that I think that blew everybody's mind. I talked to some other people walking around that were looking for vintage too, and they were saying the same thing. They couldn't believe that this show that was marketed so big as a sports card show, you know, celebration of the Royals, had so much Pokemon. Now, I don't just want to whine about something without offering a suggestion. So that's what I'm going to do. And this is for those of you who put on shows. If it's supposed to be a sports card show, then make that known to the people who want to set up. Hey, this is a sports card show. We want this to be known as a sports card show, because this might be something that, every other month when this person puts on the show, or quarterly or twice a year, they want it to be known as a sports card show. I guarantee you a lot of us out here that collect, that have no interest in Pokemon, will go to those shows. Now, I have nothing against Pokemon. I don't collect it. It's not for me. My beef, my gripe, is that when I go to a sports card show, I want to see sports cards. I don't want to see half of the room filled up with Pokemon. I know a lot of you collect vintage, modern, ultra modern, non-sports cards, and I'm going to show you some really cool non-sports cards that I found in a storage tub in an upcoming episode. But there's a time and a place for that. So if you want to promote a sports card show, you let the people who are getting tables there know, hey, this is for sports cards. Yeah, if you want to have a display case of Pokemon, great. But you're not going to have tables full of Pokemon. That's not what we're wanting out there. Now, I'm saying that not as a promoter, because, those guys have to make money. They're not doing it for free, right? They're trying to make a buck doing this. It may be that that's the only thing that will fill up the room, is to have that. It may be, so I could be totally off base, but let's promote it the right way, because I've gone to a number of shows over the last couple of years that are marketed and promoted as a sports card show that's not, in my opinion. There's way too much non-sports stuff there. The other thing that I want to maybe, especially for the bigger shows, divide it off. If there's going to be a lot of Pokemon or TCG cards there, fine. Put them in a certain area. Don't have them spread out so that it's hard to even find a vintage table or a modern table or just a sports table, because there's so much Pokemon. It shouldn't be that hard for table assignments to put the Pokemon and the TCG in one area of the room, and then the sports cards in another area room. Those are just a couple of suggestions that I have. Again, for all these things I'm talking about, please respond. You don't have to do a video response, because I'm not going to give out a prize or anything for that. But I am curious to what some of you are seeing out there, if you're seeing the same things in the area of the country that you live in. I'm in the Kansas City area, so there's not a lot here, but I'm sure some of you on the coast have a lot more shows. I'd like to know how they are in your areas, because it's something that just frustrates the heck out of me. Maybe I shouldn't let it. This is supposed to be fun. This is a hobby. But, that's one that just really bugs me. I went to a show in this little town. Well, it's not that little. It's called Lenexa, Kansas. And when I got in there was one sports card table. One. Everything else was Pokemon, TCG, and then one guy had like 3 tables of Hot Wheels cards. If I would have known it was that, I wouldn't have driven into it. Thankfully, it was only about 30 minutes away. But promote it the correct way. Let us know before we make that trip and that commitment to get there. Is it a sports card show, or is it just a card and collectible show? Just let us know. And if it is a sports card show, I want to see sports cards. I think all of you do too. Another thing, and this is something that was one of the biggest changes when I got back into the hobby. Now, like I said, I've collected for over 40 years. But I did get out for a while, but I never totally left the scene. So I did see stuff, and I was buying cards all the way. I just wasn't into it like I was. I used to sell at shows. So when I really got back into it was during the COVID era, and I knew cards had been graded. I had bought graded cards for years and years, starting with the late 90s, early 2000s. I started buying graded cards. But it changed a lot. Now, back when I first started collecting, we had the thick price guides, the annual price guides, and then there's a few monthly price guides out there as well. And it's funny because you used to open those up and read it and say, hey, this is only a guide, and it would give you things like, local teams and players from local teams may have a higher premium than guys who play somewhere else, and that was all true. So it was very, it was subjective. It was subjective. You'd go to one table and a guy would have a card priced as $30, and then 2 tables over, the same card might be $40, and you just picked and choose. You saw which one you liked better. Back then, a lot of people didn't look at anything other than quarters, so they would just buy the corner, so they would just buy the cheapest one, right? But now it's comps. And I like to go to shows and observe, even if I don't buy, because a lot of times I don't have money. I'll just go to shows and kind of people watch, and I'll kind of listen in and look at transactions and some negotiations that are going on. And you see the YouTube videos about that too. There's some great YouTube videos of people going to shows, and you can see the negotiations and stuff. But what cracks me up is comps. And the first thing when I think about comps is what comps? Your comps, my comps, the comps on, 130 point, VCP, eBay. What comps? Comps to me are no better and no more significant than the old monthly price guides. In that, hang with me here, in that it's all subjective. It's not a locked in, you have to do it, And I'm not going to get into the details. We've all seen those guys who will go to your table and either try to buy or sell, and they'll look up the comp on one website and say this card's worth $100 or it sold for $100. Yeah, but every other card in a similar grade or that looks the same may be sold for significantly higher or lower. Comps are just subjective, but some people are so caught up in those, it just kind of ruins the hobby experience. They absolutely will refuse to buy a really good card because it might be at a table for $30 more than the last time it sold. And when you look at that card, it doesn't look near as good. I don't care what the grade is on the card. No two, it's like baseball cards are like snowflakes. Grades are like a snowflake. Nothing's the same. And Greg has done a great job of this before, where he's put in the time and the effort to show you like multiple cards, the same card with multiple examples of the same grade, and they look completely different. So those of us who really buy based off of eye appeal, or as Dan would say, own appeal, or Mike Petty would say, my appeal, which when I kind of like my appeal, because I'm going to get into that when I wrap this up. You look at all these things. In every topic, almost every topic that you and I can talk about and discuss has one big thing in common. Big thing in common. And that is everything is relative. Everything is relative to you. Not to me, not to anybody else, to you. So when it comes to how you feel about eBay authentication, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, that's your choice. That's your opinion. When it comes to grading versus ungraded, a lot of people, and I haven't seen anything off for grading for a while because I'm kind of in that boat where I thought for sure SGC was going to stay and be separate from PSA and maybe kind of go more towards the just being vintage. But what's funny is if you on Facebook, if you subscribe to SGC, they don't hardly ever show vintage cards in the feed. They show new cards, ultra modern cards. And of course, now I'm not going to get into this because I don't want to bore everybody, and there's a lot better videos about that out there than mine. But a lot of things have changed, and a lot of things that we're seeing out there are making us think maybe SGC is going to go away. And so I have not really sent off stuff for grading for a while, and I may not, just to kind of see how the dust settles over the next year or so. I'm not going anywhere. My cards aren't going anywhere. They're just going to stay with me until some things get settled and we know what's going to go on with them. But everything is relative to you. Whether you go by eye appeal versus the grade, or just, any topic you want to think of, it's all relative to what works for you and your budget and what you like to collect. As my buddy Chris likes to say, remember, this is just a hobby, collect what you like. And that, yeah, it could sound corny and it seems very overgeneralized. And I understand for the people who kind of knock him for that. But he's right. He's right. For the majority of the collectors out there, it's a hobby. We're not out here trying to make a buck. We're not out here investing to hopefully sell the card for 10 times as much 10 years from now. This is vintage cards. It's vintage cards. Most of us aren't flippers. Now, some of us do a little bit of both. I understand that, but I'm talking from the vintage perspective. So anyway, I just wanted to get on a little soapbox and ramp. or rant, and this is the biggest one. I love this item. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to send it off at some point because they did refund money for me to do so. But really, eBay, this is unnecessary. Absolutely unnecessary. So hey, please like and subscribe. I want to know what your comments, or I want to hear your comments on some of these subjects and some of these topics that I brought up. I mean, there's a dozen other ones that I could have, but these are ones that it's really been on the top of my mind recently, and I wanted to discuss and wanted to get my opinion out there. And you know what? A week from now, I might have a completely different opinion. That's what makes this hobby great. We can have an opinion one day and change it another. So until next time, keep enjoying collecting. Be proud of your collection. Don't get so caught up in all the terms and the things that some people get really over analytical about, or that overthink it. It's fun. This is supposed to be fun. So let's keep having fun out there. See you next time.